Hello everyone, Chef Eduardo Garcia. It is my sincere and heart-driven pleasure to be here with all of you at this year's ACS Quality and Safety Conference. Yes, it's a virtual conference, and what I know to be certain is that to have all of you with me here in my home is about as heart-driven as this can get, so I'll take the virtual setting. So first things first, I just want to recognize everyone here in attendance. I have an incredible soft spot and serious admiration for everybody in this industry. And so having the opportunity to be here with each and every one of you to speak and share my story is just an honor. And I feel like it's important that I just nail that right in the beginning, that I feel so humbled to be in this audience. So thank you. To understand why or how it's even appropriate to have me here, I think we have to understand Eduardo's story a little bit. And so naturally, I'm from Montana. We can hear the birds outside. The doors are open here in my kitchen. Mother Nature is just such a sincere part of who I am. And so when thinking, okay, if I can't be there with all of you, I'm gonna bring you here to my home. So if the dog or cat runs in, we'll shoo him out of the way, and let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this talk. 1981, born in California. Mom moved us to Montana when we were 6 years old. It's the best move she ever did, in my opinion. And how I get from Montana to this keynote with all of you, I think is important to understand, just to set some criteria. Country kid, Boy Scout, a lot of enthusiasm as a youngster for the outdoors, a lot of interest in simply just playing and learning and observing all of the intricate details of Mother Nature. They just simply called to me, and perhaps it was because we didn't have a mall to go hang out at or an arcade. We just simply had the outdoors, so it became our afternoon place of being, our barrio, our neighborhood. And because that's what we had, we paid attention to the details. And I'm gonna bring the phrase details back up a little bit later, but it's important to share that even as a little kid, that was like a pivotal point for me, that paying attention to those details kept me from bemoaning living in a rural place where I didn't have what the town kids had. So you get Eduardo Garcia growing up in the country, crawling hands and feet, digging under rocks and leaves, looking for things, very curious about the world. And that young adolescent finds himself into fishing at some point, wants to buy flies, wants to buy his first rod, so he gets a job flipping burgers. And it's definitely not because I loved food at 15 in any way, shape, or form. It was a paycheck, 214 bucks to be exact. I went to cooking school after graduating high school, Seattle, Washington, got my associate's degree in the culinary arts. From there, I didn't quite know where I was gonna go. I had friends heading out to the Four Seasons or the W to get a corporate job chefing, and I thought, gosh, I don't know if that's quite for me. But I got student loans coming down here in a few months, and I got to figure something out. I was working 3 jobs, bussing tables, cooking, modeling for a bronze sculptor, just trying to make ends meet. And a yacht came into town and called the cooking school looking for graduates that were hungry and eager to get on a traveling boat. And my name got thrown into the hat. And on October 31st, 2001, I started on my first boat, San Diego, California. Over the next 10 years, I traveled the entire world, not all the oceans, but innumerable countries through innumerable cuisines, and had the opportunity to eat, feel, learn, and really engage in numerous cultures. It was a dream for a chef, you can imagine, fresh out of school, hungry to develop my potential, super intrigued where I could take my culinary skills. And it was like a technical pursuit in a way, right? It was just traveling the world and being in the Saint-Tropez or the St. Barts or the Portofinos, these splashy places, the Monte Carlo for the Grand Prix. They were exciting. It was beautiful to see those scenes and the glamour and the opulence, and it floated me. It was a high kind of decade, let's say, and I would say like it's a high 7 years of my 20s. And we get to this point though, when Eduardo is about 27 years old, And there's this classic photo of my hands, and that's when I was a two-handed gentleman. And the photo is, it's just of my hands in front of me like this. And the creases on my hands are black and cracked and full of what I now know it was the consistent work with organic matter, vegetal material, foods, vegetables, meats, etc. I mean, I was washing my hands. I'm a chef. I was keeping it safe, but I was getting 3 hours of sleep a night. I was working for 30, 40, 50, 60 days in that summer nonstop with the whole crew. We were all putting time in. But the thing is, as a solo chef, if you have your guests coming back at 2 a.m. from the casino and they're looking for a dessert, I was up doing that. And if you have an early riser at 6 a.m., I had to be up at 5 to make sure bagels were boiled and pastries were done. And so it was just a time in my life where I was getting very little sleep. Thank goodness I was in my 20s, so I was able to rock it out and feel good about it. I had that sort of powerful, primal, young energy. And yet the reason I mentioned the hand photo is because it was a pivotal point where I just realized that I was actually working myself into the dirt and it was not sustainable. And yet there was a lot of good things happening. So how we get catalyzed to find new directions in our life, I believe, is always very interesting. And so part of my experience with all of you here today is to just share that journey of had this crystallized career. As soon as I started to breathe a little bit of a whisper to friends and family, I'm thinking about leaving the yachting industry. They're like, you're nuts. How could you leave this? You know, it's a great job. You travel the world to some of these amazing, fancy places. And the truth is that at some point, I realized that sort of that fire inside of me, that deep, undying passion for things, whatever they may be, was no longer just enraged and on fire like it should have been, like it was in my early 20s. It was starting to taper out. It was starting to just kind of flicker, and so I paid attention to that. My body also was telling me, hey, you know, this is hard stuff. And that takeaway as a young chef mixed with that kind of, you know, voice on the shoulder that was saying, hey, you know, you're not as passionate as you used to be about this. It may be time to consider kind of where you're going and what you're doing. So those two events came together and gave me sort of the bravery that I think I needed to make that decision. Leaving a career is a big deal for anybody. And of course, for me, leaving this career where I was making good money, I was doing exciting things, traveling the world, cooking from different marketplaces and getting to know different cultures and cuisines. I mean, what a dream job for a chef. And yet, the lesson that I kept hearing that I could not put under the rug, that kept kind of coming up to the surface was, you gotta stick with your passions, Eduardo. You gotta stick with that heartbeat. You gotta stick with what sets you on fire. So, took note, and gosh, I think over the next 2 years, working with my family, working with my partner at the time, Jenny, we made a plan. We said, okay, we're gonna start a food company. We're gonna call it Montana Mex. It's gonna be Latino-inspired, healthy for you foods. We're gonna stay in the condiment category, so salsas, guacamoles, sauces. And on top of that, we're gonna take Eduardo's love of being outside, his love of cooking over coals, like that Boy Scout that graduates to an adult, but that still does, you know, still cooks over the fire and gets outside. And we're going to invite the world to sort of connect with his passion for cooking and his passion for others and food through this television show concept. We're going to call it Active Ingredient. Because I truly believe that whatever it is that you're passionate about is your active ingredient. It's the thing that catalyzes all these otherwise benign or asleep components and brings them to life. And we thought, okay, we're going to share his stoke for food, his stoke for life, and package it in the food brand and this television concept as a way to sort of bring this fire to others and hopefully inspire other people to find the same interest in food and the food story. So the sketchy, scary decision is made. We're gonna leave the boat. And I left the yacht April 2011. I was home for the first time here back in Montana after 10 years of traveling. I was home. We're starting the brand Montana Mex. We're filming for the TV concept. And that summer was just a rockin' and rollin'. pretty awesome summer to be home after 10 years of not being here, not being in Montana. So I was fly fishing, working hard. If I wasn't working, I was fly fishing. I was hanging with family. I was enjoying being here. And take the clock and tick it all the way into the fall. So September, October, I'm a hunter by trade. I'm an outdoorsman by trade. Much of the meat in our freezer is foraged, found, harvested, traded. And so hunting season has been a part of my life for a long time. And I kind of tell my partners in the business to say, hey, I'm gonna take a day and go hunt archery season. And so October 9th, 2011, I do just that. I go on a walk in the woods, backpack, bear spray, bow, food, water, first aid kit, phone, lighter, like all the Boy Scout things you think you're gonna need, and you probably will at some point need if you're out in the outdoors. And I go for that walk. I'm about 3 miles into the foothills. And so here in Montana, just to frame it out, I'm starting at right on the banks of the Yellowstone River is the trailhead that I started and parked my truck on that day. And it's about 5,000 feet elevation. And I'm headed up to about 8,000 feet elevation. And I know it's about a few hour walk, but there's a wallow or a mud hole deep up in these trees that I know about. And I just think, oh, this is gonna be a perfect midday place to catch an elk, getting muddy and getting the bugs off and cooling down. And so I like my plan. Take off from the truck with everything I need on my back, doing my cruise up the hill, just loving it. And, you know, on the one hand, we think of the outdoors as this idyllic place where we let our mind go and we kind of zone out. And the truth is that happens, but also when you're hunting, and definitely when you're hunting here, this is grizzly bear country, region 3 of Montana, and not just grizzly bears, there is all kinds of things that can stick, poke, burn, or hurt you if you're not paying attention, and even when you are paying attention. So the picture that can be painted is so easily seen as this walk in the woods, which it was, but I was acutely aware of my environment and what was going on. And at about 2.5 miles up the hillside, I come to this little slot drainage where, you know, the hillside kind of creates sort of just this little runoff. And I'm walking down into this hill and I note that there's a can like this big on the ground, no lid, lid's off to the side, sagebrush and grass growing all around it. And being curious, I walk up, I check it out, and inside the can is what looks like the remains of a baby black bear. It's been dead for years, kind of mummified. And but that's what I think it is. And I see claws that look like baby black bear claws. And being that Boy Scout, being that that kind of lover of nature, it is here in the home there'll be a windowsill right here that has a feather on it, an antler on it, and whether you're an adult or you're a kid and you come in, I just love sort of sharing that natural world with others. And I think nothing of taking my knife, put it in my left hand. I think, oh, I'm gonna just remove a claw, put it in the pocket, head on my way, and I go to do that. I take a knife out, I put it in my left hand, and as I reach down into this can, the only way I can describe getting electrocuted with 2400 volts is as if someone plugged you in to a mixing board at in a concert and in hot weather. So it was like someone turned a blow dryer onto the back of my head while at the same time putting a high frequency noise mixed with a Journey concert on loud, and lights out. That's what I remember of it. Crystal clear what I remember of it. So my next memory as a 30-year-old man on a beautiful day, otherwise beautiful day in the woods, is seeing blue sky mixed with dappled clouds scuttling past. I see treetops above me, and I think, why am I on my back? I don't know. Why are you on your back? Have this conversation with myself for a minute. And then I decide it's weird that I'm laying down in the woods. I don't really know why I'm laying down in the woods, but I should get up. So I tell myself to get to my knees, get up, And at that point, I realized that it feels like I had the wind knocked out of me. You know, if that's ever happened to you, it's a little bit disorienting, but you can kind of put your hand on it and you're like, oh, okay, I got the wind knocked out of me. Whew, it's going to take a minute, but this is going to pass. And I remember getting to my knees. I don't remember getting to my feet. And so there's this moment where, okay, I'm on my back. I convince myself to get to my knees. I convince myself like, hey, you got to get up. You got to get up. And I have no recollection of how it was that I left that site. But my next memory is of the sound of gravel underneath my feet and the sound of a western meadowlark, which is the state bird. So you should imagine, like I'm hearing gravel. I hear the trill of this meadowlark. My eyes open. I see the valley floor below me. I see that I'm walking. I see that I have bear spray in my right hand, and that my left hand, I look down, and my left hand is curled up against my body, and it is, you can see my fingers are contorted like so, and severely blackened. This is my left hand, obviously, but it's severely blackened. I think there was even a portion where I could see what looked like bone. And so what's interesting is that curious mind that I mentioned as a kid, that I am and was as a kid, in my shock, that curious mind takes over, and I start dissecting my scene of, that's funny, why am I walking without any of my backpack, my bow? So I start picking up moments of my recollection, like, oh, okay, I was hunting today. Oh, okay, I left the truck. Oh, I saw that can, I was gonna take a claw. And then I remember the heat and the noise. And I'm thinking, holy smokes, did I get electrocuted? I think I got electrocuted. And so now I kind of take a closer look. I'm walking the whole time. And I look at my cooked hand, and I'm thinking, oh, I held the knife with my left hand. I see this scar. This is the smallest scar of 9 exit wounds. And I can see that, I can see this, and I can see a hole in my left thigh, like a blowout. And I'm wearing camo pants, but it's burnt. And that's all I can see, and yet it hits me with so much certainty that I am currently walking to save my life. I am currently walking to find help. And if I stop walking, I won't get up again. There was a momentum happening that was written in some other stars that were outside of my personal control. Like my body, my intuition was already starting that journey to go get help and knew, do not stop. So I made it to the valley floor. I make it to the valley floor, and there's a gentleman working on a cabin. This is like a 3-mile descend downhill. And the gentleman calls 911, sits me down. 911 arrives, where the volunteer, this is rural Montana, near Gardner, Montana. And the volunteer fire department, it's an EMT, 3 EMTs, one's a mechanic, one's a ranger in Yellowstone Park. Like everyone's got a different day job, and they show up and they immediately just cut everything off of me, get me secured, get me on a stretcher, and zip me to the next town 45 miles north, which is Livingston. And I remember looking out the back doors of the ambulance, and I see the flashing light of my rural country town. I'm like going through it. I'm like, oh, I'm just passing home. Get to Livingston, then get transported to the local airport, onto the med jet. We land in Salt Lake City, and I think you all will appreciate this one, but the ambulance that's there to pick me up, the folks that were transporting me from the plane to the ambulance to the BT ICU, they say, well, welcome to Salt Lake City, Mr. Garcia. And I think, Salt Lake? Man, how am I gonna get home tonight? And they smile, as only a professional caregiver will know and be able to do in such a grave circumstance. But he smiled and he said, oh, you'll be here a little longer than just today. So, like cold had no idea what was happening. I was just oblivious. And so I'll never forget that moment. So kind, so caring, and so critically focused on saving this guy's life. But at the same time, he was able to bring this dose of humanity into that moment of like meeting me where I'm at. Hey, Mr. Garcia, welcome to Salt Lake. I mean, who thinks to say welcome to somewhere when there's someone dying in front of you? And that's always stuck with me. So the ambulance gets me to the burn trauma ICU, and I end up spending 50 days there. I end up going through 21 surgeries over the course of 2 years, and here I am today, alive. I think mostly well. And I could go through the details of my care at length, and it would fill another hour, if not more. But what I think is really important that I've been looking forward to sharing with each and every one of you, and I wanted to just set the table onto like, who is this guy, and how did I grow up, and what influences throughout my younger years impacted who I am as an adult, as a survivor, and as a fighter. Because I do believe it all kind of plays into that 50 days in ICU. I had had some experience with my dad, had a heart surgery in 2005. So I had some experience with being in his ICU room and kind of watching his medical professionals work. And I felt pretty comfortable with just the energy of those environments. And yet, what I don't think I experienced in his hospital stay, but what I definitely got in mine, and I feel like what I'm all about now is sharing the details of that BT ICU stay, because it was just not clinical. There was nothing clinical about it from my point of view. Sure, from my surgeon's point of view, from my nursing's point of view, from the team's point of view, there was a lot that was black and white and clinical and had to happen. But what I remember is, and I was on a lot of drugs, so I felt little pain at times. I felt a lot of pain at times. But what I remember was that right off the bat, I think it was like day 3 is when I start to have an active memory of my ICU stay. And right off the bat, I'm greeted with these smiles. And I come to notice, live in ICU for 50 days, and you start to see what 12-hour shifts look like. They don't stop at 12 hours, they end at 12, but then maybe there's log work that has to happen, and before you know it, someone's done a 14-hour day, 15-hour day. And so that nurse or that team member, you'd see him again the next day, and then you'd see him again the next day, and you'd see him again the next day, and maybe they'd get a day off, and then you'd miss them. You'd be like, well, where's Jill? Or where's Martina? Or, where's Thane? And, they had the day off. And as a patient, you're like, what? They can't take a day off, man. What about me? We're supposed to be hanging today. I want to hear about he was going on a date on Friday, and it's Sunday, I'm like, I want to hear all about it. And so the amount of humanity that I experienced in my stay at the University of Utah Burn Trauma ICU was exactly what someone like me needed to elevate beyond that place of doubt where I'm thinking, I just lost my left hand. I had testicular cancer, so we're dealing with that too. Like, I was a mess medically. I was an absolute mess. And yet, watching, when you're naked on a table and you're getting your wound care done and someone someone gives you a fentanyl lollipop and says, suck on that for a little bit. And it's just absolutely critical to have that kind of care so that you can simply go through the process of having your bandages changed and removed. And the amount of humanity that the team had below the masks, below the visors and the gloves and the gowns, that is what stuck with me in my ICU stay. Obviously, I'm grateful for the medicine and the science and the incredible education that must be present to develop the skill sets to save lives. And yet, what struck me that really kind of gives me fuel in my tank to do things like this and to have this kind of outreach in these conferences is the ability to show back up and not just say thank you, but to share what it's like for the patient, right? I remember I had a blowout on my left elbow, a blowout on my right elbow, and so those needed to be grafted and then healed. So I was bound like this. I think the first surgery, they didn't bind my elbows, so naturally it's like, oh, I'm gonna move them now, and broke those stitches and broke that, one surgery wasted, so we had to get those fixed. And I said, listen, I need you to splint my arms up for however long it's gonna take to heal, because I will move these, and I will break through your work, so I don't want to mess up your work. And I remember that moment, because I remember thinking like, oh, I'm on a team here. It feels like I'm just a patient. It feels like I'm just sort of kind of without any opportunity, without any agency, but no, I do. So that moment, hey, splint me up, because I don't want to ruin your work, and so they did. And as a patient, you're kind of pissed anyway, because you're there. You're angry, you're hurting. It's hard is an understatement. It's unfathomable how to make it through that. And yet at 7 a.m. when your new nurse team comes in, or at 7 p.m. or whenever it is, the amount of humanity that I was greeted with on every single day by my nurse team, by my professional team, by my surgeons and doctors, I got to know that they were rock climbers. I got to know they were surfers. I got to know that they were mothers and sons and daughters and friends and family, and they had stories to tell. And so on any given day, they would come in and they would share, you would do like conversation, and humanity would just simply absorb the technical details that had to happen. Wound care had to happen. Surgeries had to go down. I had 22 of them. So sort of like the rigmarole of the day was always going to be ever present. And what caught me off guard and catalyzed what I think was probably the crux move of my recovery was the amount of humanity that my professional team brought to our ICU room was such that we are still in touch today. The fact that they would come in to do their work, but they would share about they would bring their character, like their actual heartbeats in. And so you'd say, well, what do you do on your weekends? Oh, I like to go mountain bikes. All of a sudden you're talking about mountain biking, and it elevates me. I'll speak in the first person. It elevated me out of the woe and sorrow of the situation, which was tragic. Someone else would, you get to know folks after 50 days. And so, someone would come into work on a Monday and you'd say, hey, how was that Friday night? You had a date, right? Like, how'd it go? And so you start to get invested in your team, and then take that sort of moment of being invested or feeling like you have an ability as a patient. And so in those kind of days where I couldn't move anything and I was just bound and wrapped, I could still move my eyes. I had my heartbeat. I could still someone came in and smiled at me. I may not be able to move anything, but I could still grin. And I could say, yeah, I'm gonna help. This is how I'm gonna contribute to this room. I have an ability still, and I'm on this team as a patient. And I think that maybe there's patients that forget that. So this is for them too, to say, hey, we all have a role to play in that room, and it's to be as human as possible, while of course being focused on the technical work that has to be done, but to never forget, just like in that yachting kind of story, right? That as soon as I didn't feel that heartbeat anymore, I realized that I was out, I had to go. And so when I liken it to the medical community and my stay and my time in critical care, it's like my fire is connecting with other people and doing my best to fan sparks that are present in myself and in others, and saying, hey, if we can just simply focus on what we're incredibly passionate about, that is going to be one of the best prescriptions we can ever bring to ourselves and to our community. So in speaking with everyone here today, and in sharing just a little dose of how sort of my journey through tragedy was uplifted into what I'm doing now, which is managing my company, Montana Mex, and being able to share my story with other people going through trauma to help elevate their belief in their own abilities. It may look like we just lost all of these components, or we've been set back, and indeed we have been, but the three things that if I would leave anybody, even sort of this room full of well-accomplished individuals, I would be remiss to not just add this. In the face of great adversity, when we're feeling like we're up against the wall and you have no paddle, what do? Own it. Straight ownership. This is where I am. This is what's happening. This is my current reality. That is such a critical first step. Once we have that understanding, once we understand, okay, this is the scenario, this is what I'm living with, this is who and what I am today, communicate. Get it out there. Hey, I'm in pain. Hey, I need help. Hey, I've got excess of this. Do you want that? Just simply communicate your position to the world at large. And then thirdly, that naturally leads to collaborate. And I do not believe we get through this life in flying colors, just sort of paying attention to our own needs and ourself. It is important that we start right here and we realize when we're bandaged, when we're feeling like we're handcuffed or we don't have what we need, we always have something that we can offer. Always. Always, 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 no matter how many surgeries and how tightly bandaged, just simply being able to look through my eyes and just say, hey, Jill, thank you for taking care of me today. And I couldn't say it, I couldn't speak it if I was intubated, but I could shine it out. And so I think no matter how much of a deficit we feel we're in or what kind of funk we feel we're in, if our heart is beating, think of it as a spark beating. If you've ever worked on a fire, a little bit of wind, you blow on that spark and it will erupt, it will come to life. But you may not have fuel, you may have wind, you may have spark, but you may not have fuel. So own it. I don't have fuel. Communicate it. Get it out there to someone, and then leave it open for collaboration. Someone is going to bring that tinder in and help you create that bonfire soul back in your life again. So for this, I'm 9-10 years now after my injury. Not a day goes by that I don't remember how I got to this place, the amount of help I've received, the unsung heroes of the medical community and my personal caregivers that all came together to remind me that, nah, you don't walk out of the woods. You may walk out of the woods solo, but in order to get back on your feet, we do this together. We do this as a community. So to each and every one of you out there, having this opportunity to share my story and to kind of share the insights of what it took in my journey to just get here today, where I feel like I can get myself out of bed. I don't get out of bed thinking, I'm an amputee, this is horrible, my life is garbage. I tried that for a few years and it did not work for me, so I switched it. Just like, I own it, I am an amputee, I'm Eduardo Garcia, and I have the ability, if I take the fire that's sitting in here, and sometimes it feels like a flicker and other times it's a bonfire, and if I share this out with the world and I invite the world to say, see this and feel this, and hey, if you can use a little of this heat source, take it. And I feel like that's what each and every one of you do when you show up for someone like me that is critically bound in a moment where they're teetering between life and death, is we are receiving that energy from all of you. And for that, we are incredibly grateful. So I hope the rest of this conference goes swimmingly for you. It is my complete honor and pleasure to be here and just to share a little bit of my journey. And to all the caregivers, to my primary caregiver, Jenny, who's at my bedside every day, to my family, this one's for you. And to each and every one of you who work with others and try and help elevate and build that bridge between life and death, pain and sorrow, grief and understanding. Thank you so much for doing what you do. Thank you for having me. From Eduardo to all of you, take care, do good work. Adios.